Good morning, everyone. Welcome to American Scouser's morning coffee or tea with AmericanScouser.com. I have the coffee always, rocking the greatest dad this morning. And with us is the Christmas miracle. Instead of the Polish prince who's with family and everything this weekend, we have our good old gin friend, Mecca, back with us. What's up, man? Got the gin this morning?
It's whiskey flavored vodka.
Best of all worlds. So how was Christmas? How was the weekend in general for you?
Dramatic.
Really?
I was sick on Saturday, and then my mother-in-law was sick yesterday. So, yes, I didn't even get to have Christmas dinner. So that's that. Those potatoes will now become next
for you. Yes,
those potatoes will now become next year's gin.
I was gonna say, yeah, that's when the food is involved. I'm sure there was a lot of drama involved with you and your disappointment.
Oh, there was a riot and police were called. How dare they keep me away from my plate?
Well, some news to get to. Obviously, we're back in the Premier League. There's a game going on as we speak, and Brentford is still up 2-1 against Tottenham. So I guess let me ask you that before I pull up some of the headlines to talk about. But how do you expect this break to affect teams? Like, do you see them affecting specific teams better than others? Because, when we make these predictions for the games and stuff like that, we kind of basing everything on freaking like over a month and a half ago. So do you think certain teams will kind of like react to this better and it will hurt some other teams?
I would say that the teams that had players that went to the World Cup will probably suffer a little bit for a few weeks, and the teams that didn't, like Brentford, who hadn't, I don't think if they had any, they didn't have many, probably will function a little bit better because they were able to keep everybody together and work on things over the month. Whereas I think we kind of saw for us against City in the League Cup and for City as well, there was just a little bit of disjointedness about those teams that had a lot of players away that will have to recover. They can't just drop straight back into it. Those players are going to have a recovery period. Maybe they're going to have different training schedules to the rest of the team. So we probably won't be until March for those big teams, big clubs that had those players go away before they start looking like the crap they were before the World Cup.
Meanwhile, speaking of crap, Tottenham has tied it up. They were down 2 when I realized there was a game going on, and it was first 2-1 with Kane, and it just became 2-2. So a couple of headlines. Let's talk about this one because people who are overweight like us, I don't know, slightly offensive that thank God nobody's going around calling us out, but Pep calls out Phillips as returning from overweight from World Cup duty. I mean, how do you... It's one thing to say maybe that's not why he's playing. He has to get back into game shape and stuff like that. You think it's kind of like there's a reason he flat out calls him out pretty much fat coming from World Cup? I mean, how much weight can a guy gain in Qatar in a month?
Well, I think we have to understand that their version of overweight and our version of overweight are entirely different. I measure my weight. You people over here and in the rest of the world measure your weight in pounds or kilos. I measure my weight in Calvin Phillips's. So I'm about 4 Calvin Phillips's overweight.
I might have gained just Calvin Phillips over the weekend, to be fair. So I guess you can gain that weight pretty fast.
Yeah, I think as we explained. But no, I think for them, overweight would probably be like 2 pounds or 3 pounds or something. That seems innocent to us. But I know from my own experience and my own studies that the thing that affects speed more than anything else is your body fat percentage. So you always hear that thing, like, if people bulk up, like athletes bulk up, they lose their speed. But then you look at like sprinters and they're all bulked up. And in the case of Michael Johnson in the 80s, very bulked up and not technically legally so. But body fat percentage, like you lose fat, you gain speed. It's less ballast to be carrying. So he's probably not overweight by our standards, but by their standards. And we all know Guardiola is exceptionally strict on the details. He probably, drank a glass of water too much. It was a half a pound over, and now he's a fat bastard as far as Pep is concerned. But at the same time, for Pep Guardiola to come out and say it probably speaks to maybe Calvin Phillips is not the most disciplined trainer at Manchester City, and maybe his time there is going to be short. Because I don't remember Guardiola calling anybody like that out before.
Exactly. That's why I thought it was odd. I mean, there's certain managers that you know for calling people out, like naming names, if you will. And Pep is definitely not one of them. And if anything, he's kind of a guy that kind of more covers for his guy, kind of like Klopp, like, in terms of, backs his guy instead of throws him under the bus. And same thing with Klopp, right? When he singles somebody out and sets something, we're kind of like stop and say, whoa, because we're not usually like expecting it. So I thought that was like odd. Alan is with us as always. Good morning. He says, Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas. So a couple of other headlines that I wanted to see if, okay, hold on. I got to find it first because the moment I saw it, I was like, hey, okay. So this was one of them that Ten Hag told Martinez to be ready for the league when he comes back. Is that fair to, like, because I'm seeing from like City and Liverpool and stuff that we are giving, actually Liverpool more than I think any other team is giving a set number of days off almost from the day they finish playing, whereas some players come back earlier. Which one are you a bigger fan of? Letting them come back early as possible? Like if you're ready to come back, or do you almost force that break on the guy, knowing it's one hell of a season coming up in the next 2-3 months?
Well, there is a saying in sports training, which is rest is a weapon. And actually, I'd say most professional players and probably most professional athletes don't like to rest. They always feel that they're losing their gains if they take a day off here or 2 days off there. So in general, rest is a good thing, especially if you've been away to a tournament in the Middle East in the blazing heat. But at the same time, it probably comes down to the player. Like, there's some players that are just ready to go all the time. I can't imagine James Milner ever needing a rest at all. I mean, he's probably going to have to be tied down in his coffin when he gets buried just to stop him from running a lap. But he'll still be faster than me as well as a dead body running around. But he, I think it depends on the players. That thing with United, it seems to me either one of two things. Either Ten Hag is desperate and he needs to get his better players, what he considers his better players on the field, or he's now thinking that now Ronaldo's gone, now I can do it my way, and we're going to start today, like laying down the law kind of a deal, which doesn't always work. So we might have some comedy value out of this down the pipe.
Yeah, that should definitely be interesting because I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I understand the let's get back to business kind of thing, but you got to kind of bear in mind, especially, I don't know, I almost felt like it was more about not game, but it's like, okay, stop partying nonstop night and day and then get back in action kind of thing. Because it's one thing for, I don't know, like Van Dijk or somebody to come back and they're not celebrating partying. It's just more like actual rest. I think more Martinez is not really necessarily resting probably those guys who won. They're going from like party to party and doing all that kind of stuff. That's not really rest either. It's probably even worse actually than, being rested and idle.
Yeah, you could be right. It could also be a mentality that we could also Ten Hag could also be talking in terms of mentality, like, as in don't come back thinking you're still at the World Cup and you have that trophy and you're on that high. I think it could be more like, you have a job here, so make sure you're doing it. Otherwise, you'll end up working with Eric, filling the masses.
Okay, so let's get to today. The boys are back in action. We got like a little more than 3 hours over here. So this is a pregame at the same time. What do you expect to see? Let's start with the lineup, I guess. I think in most ways, due to availability and stuff, and this is kind of concerning as we get into a bunch of games, that the lineup is making kind of itself due to availability. But what do you expect to see in terms of a lineup?
Pretty much what we had in the League Cup. I think like maybe Van Dijk in at the back. Not Konate. I've disappeared. Not Konate, and then obviously
Trent?
No. The goalkeeper. I don't know why I'm blanking on the goalkeeper. Probably from the whiskey flavored vodka.
Must be.
Yeah. Allison back in goal instead of Keller, who did a decent enough job against City. But I think pretty much the same thing. Bobby's out, isn't he?
Bobby's out, yeah.
And Nunes will be up there. Salah will be up there. Maybe Carvalho on that side.
Bobby, what do you feel about Carvalho playing on that side? Because obviously it does not suit him, but we kind of keep trying and trying, mainly due to lack of options more than anything else. I mean, let's face it, if Diaz and Jota and those guys are back, there's no way Carvalho is sniffing that position. But what do you make of it? I mean, it's a young kid, first of all, that we're trying to kind of, get him into Premier League shape and understanding the game and understanding the team. Is it really fair for a young kid to be constantly playing out of position? We did the same for Curtis a long time as well.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's I mean, the thing about him, like Diaz looks like he's 13 years old and he's just made his confirmation. Like he just looks like a kid, whereas Carvalho actually looks like he's 40 and he has 5 kids and a mortgage he can barely pay. Just something about his face makes him look old. But I think you're right. He's not playing in his strongest position, and he's kind of trying to replicate something that Diaz is really good at doing, which is breaking down that side of the field and moving around. But it is necessity, as I say. Unless we have Jota and or Diaz back, or Bobby, so we can put Nunes out there and that sort of half left wing, half striker thing we saw just before the World Cup. We're kind of stuck. We could put Ox out there, but who knows? Ox, it's just, I know you don't like to hear it, but it's past your time for the Ox.
I never like Ox on a wing either. I mean, he would normally play like right or whatever, and he has in the past, but I really don't like him on that wing. I mean, I don't even recently like him anywhere, but, at least in the past, his most effective was, coming from midfield and taking advantage of space and stuff like that and being that guy in front of the box. But, I mean, would you try something different because of the lack of availability, or you don't want to mess up a system just because really, for the most part, there's only one slot that you can't fill right now, which is a winger?
I wouldn't worry about a system at all because we're not doing very well. It's not like we're challenging for the title and we're 3 points away from City or ahead of them or whatever. We're not having a good league season. So we have a lot of wiggle room to mess around. So for me, I would, with Trent and Robinson, I would go for like a diamond midfield with Salah and Nunes up front and then just remove the need for the winger and then maybe put Carvalho in that number 10 spot behind the 2 strikers, and maybe that will work out better for him. And then just let the fullbacks do what we all know they're very good at doing, which is attacking the wings. But that's me. It's 9 o'clock on a Monday morning on St. Stephen's stroke Boxing Day, and I'm on a podcast and not managing Liverpool, and that's probably why. Not because I drink whiskey flavored vodka at 9 a.m. in the morning. That has nothing to do with it. But
that could have derailed your career a little bit.
Yeah, that experimentation with alcohol flavors that's what stopped me. But it's a practicality thing. I think we can all agree as Liverpool fans that if there's a million great things we can say about Jurgen Klopp, but tactical flexibility is not one of them.
Yes, exactly. And I think that's what, people kind of like fight that because, he's done so well, so he can do no wrong kind of an attitude. But yes, when it comes to kind of adjusting things, and I think is that because the systems that he uses demands people to know exactly where to be, what to do, and all that kind of stuff takes a lot of time to implement. And that's why his thing always has been, new player comes in, they don't really play for a while because they got to learn exactly what the system is. Is it because it's so freaking complicated, or he just does not, it takes a long time for him to actually have trust in a player?
That's because he's German. That's literally it. Vorsprung durch Technik. No, but I mean, it is. If you kind of read back on German soccer tactical culture, it's always been very regimented. Like in the 80s, every single German team played 5-3-2 with the sweeper and the 2 wing backs before it became a thing. If one wing back went forward, the other one had to go back, almost like Pistons, and it never changed. Regardless, they just had better players in every position than everybody else at the time. And especially when Germany unified, then they suddenly had access to all these fantastic players from East Germany who were all creative. It's just the German way, as far as I'm aware. From my experience, they're just very regimented thinkers, and I'm sure Klopp is the exact same. He has a way he sees the game, and everybody has to fit into that way. And I think you're right. And also, he likes to get players to learn the system, and then he has to learn to trust them within that system. So it is a lot of regimented stuff. And when you're that regimented, even a minor change is going to throw your thinking out for a loop, So I think it's a combination of things. I mean, it's worked so far, so you can't really complain.
Exactly. Yeah.
But sometimes when it stops working, trying to make it work is not the best idea. Maybe sometimes the best plan is to alter something.
I think so, because it's almost looks like trying the same thing over and over again, and the whole madness thing. So let's get.
But he is mad. To be fair, he would be Jurgen Klopp if he wasn't a little bit mental.
So let's get to the game today. I think, we were talking about it on Friday as well. I think my biggest concern out of this game is the fact that we're going against an Unai Emery team who kind of knows, in terms of shape-wise, how to set up against our system that we were talking about. How concerned are you with the game? What do you expect to see out of the game? Should we be optimistic, or should I be cringing for the next 3 hours? You tell me.
I think we're going to concede the first goal. As always,
I don't even count it as a prediction anymore.
That's not, yeah. even I can get that prediction right. I think we'll have a lot of the ball. I think without Firmino, we might struggle to create an awful lot of good quality chances. I think Nunez will miss a few good quality chances that he created himself, maybe. And then we might get out of it 1-1 or maybe a 2-1 win. Because, as you say, Unai Emery sets everything. Like, the thing about Unai Emery is he's almost. It's like he plans to play in Europe, so he sets everything up, even in the domestic leagues, as if he's playing a European knockout competition, which is why he's so good in European knockout competition with his teams. So I think, it's a game not set up for us. I'd rather face Roberto Martinez team today than Unai Emery. Yeah, because at least you're going to get.
Coaches probably say that want to play Martinez instead of Unai Emery, because I think the way he plays is. Yeah, that's a good analogy. I think it's like a cup competition where he does not want to concede. As long as we don't concede, we always have a chance of scoring, kind of a deal. And, he sets the shape that way. And it's kind of it's usually teams that are hard to break down. And I think that's not having Bobby. And I don't know, it's going to be a lot on Thiago and stuff. And whenever we kind of go into a game relying a lot on Thiago, it doesn't pan out as well. You kind of want him to be more. If we have a lot of possession, that kind of helps them out, I think. But it's just now sometimes we do this thing where we used to do it with Coutinho all the time, just give him the ball and be like, well, okay, make something happen, kind of a deal. And I think that's when it doesn't work. Whereas when it's in the game of play and then he has the space and the ball, he can create something, then see something that somebody else is not, be a step in front of everybody. But when we just give him the ball and be like, okay, you're going to have to create because they're really sitting back there, not much comes out of it. Let's talk Nunez for a little bit. I don't know if I've asked you. Obviously, we haven't talked in a while. What do you make of him so far? I mean, obviously, it's extremes. I don't see a lot of people in the middle where I personally think everybody should be. It's way too freaking early. You see some glimpses of some good stuff, and then you see some things that, make you say, well, he's not as developed as maybe Haaland or somebody like that you're comparing to. Where do you sit with him? I'm assuming you're going to be somewhere in the middle of the flop and the best in the world as well. But
well, he's not the best in the world, and I don't think he's ever going to be. Well, I just had to check there. He's 23 years old, so he should be hitting his goal scoring peak in 2 years. I think there's a study that showed strikers peak a lot earlier than everybody else. They hit we saw that Michael Owen, Robbie Fowler from our own thing, Harry Kane, the natural strikers, the ones that play in that 9 position, usually tap out or bottom out, whatever it is, on their peak goal scoring by about 26, and then 27, 28, 29, they're almost living on reputation at that point, because you can see their graph of goals goes down. but they still, they know where the goal is, as the cliche goes. So he has time to develop. The problem that I have with him is that he misses the easy chances. And that's a sin for a striker. The easy ones are the bread and butter, as they used to say. So he should be scoring, like, the one-on-ones, like the one against Manchester City where he rifled it across the goal. That was like, if you're coaching a kid in that situation, you tell him to turn his left hip out and then just pass it into the bottom corner. But he didn't think of that. Like, he had too much time to think, and he almost, like, passed it to the corner flag.
Is that part of the problem? It's a lot in his head. Then
we discussed this before. Like, on the last time I was on, like, the easier chances that he has, the harder he makes them. Whereas the really complicated, or the ones where he doesn't get to think, where the ball's popping, pop, pass, and it gets to his foot, and he just instinctively puts it in. Those are the ones that he scores, and that's a problem, because with his speed, he's going to have a lot more 1v1s. Like Salah does than maybe Firmino would have, because he's not the fastest. So that means he needs to be able to play when he has time to think. And I don't know how you develop that at 23 years of age. That seems to be something that gets developed when you're 13 years of age.
But is that because, like, he's not used to that? Like, he's overthinking it? Or is just like a confidence thing? I mean, he had games where I felt like, as he got more and more goals back to back, that he would, get that confidence, and that issue would kind of like solve itself. But it has not. It's just kind of like, you go 2 games. It's almost like, and I think the biggest thing that has happened to the kid, the worst thing, is probably coming over the Premier League with a high price tag, same time as Haaland, and constantly probably like comparing himself to that. I mean, you think, once he gets settled, that will go away, or is that kind of like in his type of play?
Well, let's flip it the other way. Haaland doesn't have that problem with the price tag and the reputation and the demands and the pressures. And I think the difference is that Haaland walks onto the pitch thinking, I'm going to score 3 goals today. I'm the better player. I'm the best player on this field. You could put 20 other players on this field on the opposition. I'm still better than every one of them players. Whereas Núñez comes on, and it's a good team mentality, but Núñez comes on and goes, maybe I'll do okay. I'll do my best for the team. Like, I'm here for you guys. Which is a great midfielder, winger, fullback, central defender, defensive mid, and maybe not goalkeeper, but every other position except for goalkeeper and striker. That's a great mentality. But for the goalkeepers and the strikers, especially, you have to go onto that field knowing you're going to score a hat trick, or you're going to keep a clean sheet. If you don't have that arrogance and that confidence, I think it affects your game. Like we talk about Harry Kane, everybody jokes about him claiming goals that weren't his, etc., etc. But Harry Kane doesn't go onto that field thinking he might score a goal. Harry Kane is going to claim every goal, even if it's the ones against him, because he's that arrogant. And I think that's the difference maker for Haaland and Núñez. I think Núñez is just lacking the arrogance.
And you think it's too late for him to develop that in the next few years?
Yeah, no, I believe so. I think my entire experience of football, from a player to a really bad player to a really mediocre coach, was if it walks like a duck and it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it's a duck. And it's going to be a duck forever. You can't really change the nature of a player unless they're willing to change. And most of the time, people don't see what change needs to be made in general. That's a life advice for all those kids out there.
And you don't, I mean, obviously we don't know the mental side of things. I mean, you think of a player like Mo, who came to the Premier League, really struggled, but you could almost tell the way Mo thinks, the way he works on his game and stuff, that he went back almost like, you know what, I'm going to kick some ass and I'm going to come back and kick some more ass kind of a deal. Whereas, I mean, that's more like a mentality of a player, even when they're struggling, saying, I'm going to keep working on this. I'm going to get better, and I'm going to come back and I'm going to kick ass in the Premier League. And you can almost tell when he came back with a mission. I just hope, we don't know. The kid is young. He's very aggressive, and he does cause. And that's the thing. Is it because he's more of a player that doesn't want a system? Because he's just like going around like breaking things, like, you know what I mean? Just like causing havoc, and which opens up things for other players. But when he's more restricted in the system, I think it's a bit trickier for him to be able to cause that havoc.
It kind of ties in what we said about Klopp, because Klopp is a systems manager. There are. I hate to say it because I know he has a sort of bad reputation with Liverpool fans, but as an Irish fan, like, we all love him to a degree. But Martin O'Neill was one of those managers who would have a system, and then somewhere in the attack, you just have a player that you just go, just do what you want. You're the, like, Emil Heskey or whoever. You do what you want, and then we'll back you up because of it.
Can you do that in today's game, though? To be
fair? Yeah, the game hasn't changed. Like, I mean, you're not. Are you gonna, like, if we signed a prime Messi, are we gonna say, okay, you have to fit into our system, or are you gonna say, just do what you do? We'll figure the rest out behind you.
I guess you can adjust your system.
Yeah, you can adjust your system for. I mean, we do for Bobby. To be fair, we play that 4-3-3. I mean, Firmino is the number 9. We don't play 4-3-3 anymore because he drops into midfield to play, and we adjust around Firmino. So it's not that we can't do it. I just don't think Núñez shows the consistency that allows Klopp to be able to do that with Núñez. But I think, like, it's just that arrogance that, you know, we can talk about the technicalities and the systems and all that, but for Núñez to function, he has to believe that he's the best player in the field. Like I know Messi has a reputation as a nice guy, and he's a team player and all that. But Messi and Ronaldo and pretty much any decent attacker blames everybody else when his thing doesn't happen. And I think that's, like, almost the difference. Like, you know, if Ronaldo doesn't get a good shot on goal, that's your fault. You didn't pass the ball exactly to me the way it's supposed to be done. Yeah. Even if that's not true, that's his mentality. And I think Núñez would literally go, I'm sorry, that was all my fault. Even though that pass 20 passes ago was the wrong pass, that's all my fault. And it's a great human trait to have, but probably a terrible striker's trait.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think it's totally different than, you know, for example, like a winger like Mo, or, like, you know, when Mane was Diaz and stuff like that, those guys, because it's like a different ordeal to be the guy in the middle and be the striker, if you will. So Tottenham game ends as 2-2, which means a guy above us drops some points, which opens the door to gain some ground over here. Give me a score prediction before we go. What do you expect to see? Do you go with that 2-1 win?
No, I'm gonna stick with 2-1. Yeah, I'll stick with 2. I think we'll win it, but I don't want to say we'll struggle, because it's not like we're going to be outplayed, but we're going to have a lot of the ball, I think, and we're just not going to create the chances that amount of possession would lead you to believe you would create. But having said that, we all know my predictions are worth, like, the vodka gin that's in my cup, i.e. nothing. So it could be a 4-0 win to us, or a 2-0 loss. I don't know, but I'm going to say 2-1. I just there's something, looking even at the friendlies, we just look a bit disjointed. Like we haven't used that month very well to connect all the dots.
Is that because, like, I mean, I find it hard to judge based on those games, just because, you know, you're missing the entire spine of the team, and you're missing some guys that would. I mean, yeah, I realize it's a system. Somebody else should be able to come in and stuff. But when you try to replace, it always reminds me of, like, those League Cup games and stuff like that, where, you know, we put still a quality lineup out, but it's guys who are not used to playing with each other all the time. So even the system is the same. You get a lot of, like, disjointed movements, triangles that are not set right and stuff like that. And that's why I'm looking at those games, and I can't take too much from them. You saw, like you mentioned, like the City game, where almost like both teams looked the same way. But it looked like we were missing more of the important key players. I think without Van Dijk next to him, Robertson is not the Robertson that we're used to or what we expect. That affects him a lot. I mean, I think you saw that this preseason or whatever, mid-season camp or whatever you want to call it, like on that left-hand side. Defensively, he really struggles when there's no Van Dijk, either to direct him or to cover his back or whatever the case might be. But I'm going with, like, a tough win as well, but it would be key to start getting some 3 points to climb up, because top 4 is going to be crucial. Tottenham now has 16 games, 30 points, which means we're like 2 games behind, 8 points behind. And that's basically like the top 4 spot right there now, with only United above us, 4 points ahead of us, because really getting that 4 with all these names thrown around. So before we go over here, give me that gut feeling of yours. of the big guts, how big of a feeling do you have for January movements and us bringing things, changing things up, bringing people in?
We will be teased with Bellingham, and then we'll get some mid-card German midfielder that nobody's ever heard of, and then we'll have the same conversation we have with these players. He just needs time to settle, and that was a crap move. I think we're kind of waiting. If all those investment stories are true, we're kind of waiting on that. If we can get that over the line, then we'll get Bellingham.
Running out though, isn't it? We're like what starts January 1st, right? Like with basically the January it starts the action. 5 days over here. It'll be interesting to see what happens. I mean, I don't think you get like a Bellingham or anything across the rumors came out this weekend that the offer that was made to Benfica was from us, in fact, for like 100, and they were like, nah, we want kind of like the full price tag. I'm really worried about that move in terms of like a high dollar move, to be honest with you. Like Bellingham, I'm sold. I'd rather give 150 to Bellingham than 100 to Enzo, just because I know we've seen so many. And like I say, I realize this is not just a World Cup. We've probably been monitoring him before and all that kind of stuff. But we've seen way too many over the years, Mecca, where somebody performs really well in the World Cup. The price tag goes up. And then they go back to what they normally were and not their World Cup self. And the buyer is disappointed and the seller is laughing all the way to the bank.
Yeah, no, it's a phenomenon for every club. The World Cup is probably the worst. The World Cup and the FIFA Youth World Cup is probably the two worst places to go look for a player. Because there was a statistic as well about the number of players that won the FIFA Youth World Cup that actually made it into the top levels of the game was like 2%. So all these scouts at those, snapping up all these young kids thinking they're going to be the next big thing are generally massively disappointed. We know from 2002, 2003 with El Hadji Diouf and Salif Diao and all those looked great in the World Cup, looked pants against Crystal Palace on a Wednesday League Cup night. So yeah, I would rather push if we had the money, the extra 50 million or whatever for Bellingham, because we know what we've been looking at for months with him, than somebody who looked good in the World Cup. I wouldn't spend 10 cents on a player from the World Cup right now.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, and you can tell it's almost like everything you need, well worth the money. So it would be nice to get that across, but don't want to get the hopes up until it does really happen. Okay, well, let's get ready for the game, buddy. 3 hours. By then, you'll knock out that, what is it, whiskey flavored gin? Or was it gin flavored?
Whiskey vodka.
Whiskey flavored vodka. That's what it is.
Whiskey. That's what I'm calling it. Whiskey. And it even sounds Russian. So look, it works in all angles.
Dude, that's $1 million idea right there.
Seriously.
That's the Christmas spirit right there, Josh. Well, Mecca, thanks, buddy. And then thanks to all those listening, sharing, all that kind of good stuff. We will be back tonight on our live podcast night that we do every Monday nights. And obviously, we'll have a lot to talk about the game. So see you guys then. Have a great Monday. Take care.